I will begin today's lesson with asking you a question. Which of these sentences do you think is correct? We briefly discussed the problem, or we discussed the problem briefly. Do you think the first one, or maybe it's the second one, or maybe neither of them is correct? But the answer is, the two versions are correct. Welcome to a new episode on your channel Pure English, and today's lesson will be about the positions of adverbs inside a sentence. So, if I have an adverb or more than one adverb, where in the sentence should I put them? Well, there are three possible positions for adverbs in sentences. We have the front position, we have the mid position, and we have the end position. Let me clarify the differences between the three positions or the three types of places. Well, when we say that the adverb is placed in the front position, this means that the adverb is placed before the subject. Before the subject, usually at the beginning of the sentence. Like in this example, when we say, sometimes I feel like going home. This means that the adverb, which is sometimes, is placed in the front position because it's placed before the subject. In this sentence, the subject is I. So the sentence says, sometimes I feel like going home. Well, so the first possible position for an adverb in a sentence is the front position, which is simply placing the adverb before the subject, most probably at the very beginning of the sentence. The second possible position for an adverb in a sentence is to put it in the mid position, and this is simply putting the adverb after the subject but before the verb. So, let's have an example to highlight this. She usually performs better than this. So, as you can see, the adverb usually is placed in the mid position after the subject, which is she, and before the verb, which is performs. So, the sentence says, she usually performs better than this. And the last possible position for an adverb in a sentence is the end position. And by the end position, I mean placing the adverb after the verb. Let's have an example. When we say, he sat in the corner quietly, the adverb quietly is placed after the verb, which is sat. By the way, in this position, the adverb and the verb don't have to be immediately next to each other. So I don't need to immediately place the adverb after the verb. The point is to have the adverb later than the verb in the sentence, but they don't have to be immediately next to each other. So the sentence again says, he sat in the corner quietly. Quietly is at the end of the sentence in the end position, which means that the adverb is placed after the verb. But things do not end here. The problem is there are certain cases in which some of these positions are impossible, and we are obliged or forced to place the adverb in one position or another. For example, if your main verb in the sentence, if the main verb is verb to be, which is the verb be, in any of its forms, its present forms, am or is or are, or its past forms, was and were. If the main verb in the sentence is any of these, you cannot place the adverb before the verb. It has to be placed after it. For example, we cannot say, they often are here by noon. because the main verb here is verb to be, which is are. So we have to put the adverb often after it. So the sentence should be, they are often here by noon. So the point I'm making here is that if your main verb is verb to be, is any of the famous 5 forms of verb to be, am, is, are, was, and were, you have to put the adverb after verb to be and not before it. Another case. If your verb phrase consists of more than one verb, which means that your verb phrase consists of a main verb and one or more auxiliary verbs, you have to put the adverb after the first auxiliary. So, for example, when I say, is working, that's a verb phrase consisting of 2 verbs. Is as an auxiliary verb, working as a main verb. Sometimes the verb phrase consists of 3 verbs, like in, has been working. We have 2 auxiliaries here, has been, and we have one main verb, which is working. And you can have sometimes 4 verbs in the main, or in the verb phrase, like when you say, will have been working. We have 3 auxiliaries here, will, have, been, and we have the main verb, working. So if your verb phrase consists of 2 verbs, 3 verbs, or 4 verbs, you put your adverb after the first auxiliary. For example, when we say, we would usually go by car. We would usually go by car. As you can see, usually is the adverb and it's placed after the auxiliary verb. We here have only one auxiliary verb, which is would. So we put the adverb usually after it, and we have the sentence in the form, we would usually go by car. We cannot say, we usually would go by car. We shouldn't put the adverb before the auxiliary, but it has to be placed after the first auxiliary. Also, if you have an object in the sentence, it is preferable to put the adverb after the object. So in the very first example that we mentioned at the beginning of the lesson, when we said we discussed the problem briefly, we mentioned that there were 2 possible answers. We could say we briefly discussed the problem, that's correct, or we could say we discussed the problem briefly. However, because there is an object in the sentence, which is the word, the problem, that's your object, that's what you discussed, so it is preferable to place the adverb after the object by saying we discussed the problem briefly. So the point I'm making here is that if your sentence contains an object, it's preferable to put the adverb after the object, even if there are possible positions grammatically for the adverb apart from this position after the object, but placing the adverb after the object is the most preferable form. Sometimes, however, your object is very long, a long phrase, a group of words rather than a single word. For example, imagine this sentence with me. We have a solution to a problem, and this solution is a long-term solution. So the object in the sentence I'm going to mention is the long-term solution to the problem. That's a very long phrase consisting of several words, of multiple words. In this case, it's preferable to put the adverb before the verb immediately or immediately after the verb. For example, we can say, we considered briefly the long-term solution to the problem, which means that we are putting the adverb briefly after the verb, considered, or we can place it before the verb by saying, we briefly considered the long-term solution to the problem. But it's not preferable to put the adverb, in this case, after the object, although we said in the previous point that it's preferable to put the adverb after the object, but that's in case of short objects. But when your object is long, like in this particular sentence, it is preferable to place the adverb before the object, that long object, either immediately before the verb, we briefly considered, or immediately after the verb, we considered briefly. And here we come to the end of today's lesson about the possible positions of adverbs. I hope it was useful for you, and if you liked the video, if the content of the video appealed to you, please like the video, share it with anyone who might be interested in learning English and English grammar, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for our next lessons. Enjoy the rest of your day, my friends, and goodbye for now.